समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Russia's Vladimir Putin has dialed Prime Minister Modi even as China's foreign minister touches down in Delhi, leading to the big geopolitical question. Is Trump managing to do the unthinkable, bringing India, Russia, and China along one axis to take out the chaos that Donald Trump has unleashed with his so-called tariff war? I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll be looking at the ramifications of Vladimir Putin's phone call to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a phone call which both leaders have commented on publicly. Prime Minister addressed Vladimir Putin as his friend, thanked him for his phone call, and spoke about how India has consistently advocated for a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict. This phone call took place even as China's foreign minister touched down in Delhi. The big question now is whether there is an India-Russia-China axis emerging to take on Trump. And even if it is, for India, there are many concerns in relation to China, given its recent role in Operation Sindoor vis-a-vis Pakistan and being firmly in Pakistan's camp. Can India really do close business with China, even if it is to take on Donald Trump? Or is Trump being given a dose of his own infamous transactionalism? To understand all that is happening with the world quite literally being turned upside down, it would seem, on some days, let me introduce our two very distinguished guests on the program today. Military veteran General Raj Shukla is with us. Always a pleasure, sir. And veteran diplomat Ambassador Yash Sinha is with us. Also always a pleasure to have both of you on. I can't think of two finer minds to help us make sense of what is happening. A Putin phone call to Modi, a Chinese foreign minister meeting with our FM Jaishankar. Is Trump upending all predictability in the world of geopolitics? I'll start with you, Ambassador Yash Sinha. Till a few weeks ago, we were talking about how China backed Pakistan in Operation Sindoor. You now have the Chinese FM in Delhi. You have Putin calling Modi. There's talk of an India-Russia-China axis. China has even backed reviving the trilateral between the three countries. How do you look at the developments?
Barkha, thank you for having me on your show. I think we are in a period of great churn. I think international relations have basically been stood on its head. I think it's an age of churn, age of disruption, and now you are seeing multi-alignment at work. A few years ago, I would have dismissed the prospects of the RIC, as it was called, Russia, India, China, and especially after Galwan in 2020, I would think that it was a chimera. It would never sort of reappear. But again, this I won't call it an axis, but the meeting between the three countries, the interaction between the three countries is significant. However, I continue to maintain that the India-US relationship is far too important, and both parties, India and the United States, are aware of it, and neither side is going to jettison that relationship. But the fact of the matter is that it has been severely dented. There is a complete lack of trust, particularly at the level of the public in India, certainly, and I think that has ramifications. And I think the fact that President Putin called Prime Minister soon after the Alaska summit, and of course, you will recall that Prime Minister Modi had spoken to President Putin and President Zelensky before the Alaska summit. So what's going to transpire in the next 3 to 4 hours in the White House? And of course, the exchanges between Russia and India and China with their foreign minister in town, I think is going to be very interesting and needs to be closely watched.
Exactly right. We have that big meeting between Trump and Zelensky taking place in a few hours from now, and that Putin phone call timing also has to be taken cognizance of. General Shukla, I do agree that words like axis, allies, this is too premature, especially given China's roles and our concerns over China's role in Operation Sindoor. But then, if Trump is the great practitioner of transactional politics, I think in a way he's being paid back by the world in kind. I don't think the leaders of India, certainly not our leaders, but also the leaders of Russia and China have blinders on. Everybody might know that this is a kind of positioning on the chessboard to checkmate, to counter what Trump is doing. How do you see what's happening?
So, Barkha, one brief comment. It's not only a world in great churn, but it's a very exciting world. And I think today India needs fewer coders and many more deft geopolitical analysts, because it is really a very challenging time. So just a few comments. I mean, it's so difficult. One can say nothing with certitude, but just a few comments. I think one is that it is really, these are challenging times for Indian statecraft. We'll have to admit that. Yeah. Behind all the visible moves, I think there are bigger games at play. Is America forcing India to make a choice between cheap Russian oil and access to the American economy? How do you respond to it? How you calibrate your moves? It's not going to be easy. But on the larger issue that you raised, I think morality is getting the better of transactions. Or what I mean, there is a moral suasion to international relations. And here I feel that, the problem is not about American foreign policy. It's Trump's MAGA design, which is facing a challenge on account of its unreasonableness and sheer hubris. I mean, to think that you can get a country like India to do your bidding, whoever is the brain behind this, is, to put it ever so politely, very, very unwise. And therefore, there are bigger games, as I said, before moves afoot. Yeah. Before Alaska, Putin spoke to Xi, he spoke to Prime Minister Modi, and to the Brazilian president. After Alaska, he has spoken to Xi, and he has spoken to Prime Minister Modi. In better times for Indo-American relations, perhaps that call would have been between Trump and Prime Minister Modi, or Biden, Trump, and Prime Minister Modi. That is itself a change. The other point is, it's time for the Americans to acknowledge this. Let me say what Ambassador Sinha said. Of course, we must still be at it. If the Indo-American relationship can get going, I'll be the happiest. But this is my response to, MAGA hubris. Please realize that you are a declining hegemon. I have pointed out the economic metric in favor of China on your show. Let me just reiterate, by 2035, it's going to be 24% of the global GDP, with China 14% from USA. As stark as that. In technology, the pendulum has swung hugely in China's favor. Let's look at AI. In these 0 to 1 technologies, game-changing technologies like ChatGPT, USA is still ahead. But in deep sea kind of technologies which are about adaptation, which are about scaling, productivity, China is fast catching up. In the military domain, apart from subsea, in most domains in the Western Pacific, China is ahead of USA. So I think, we are heading for 3 spheres of influence. They are pretty apparent to me. The good news for India is that we have 2 foot or 2 feet. We have a foot at least in 2 of those spheres. One is, of course, Asia. One is we are on pretty good terms with Russia. So while there is the challenge, there is hope. And let me also, the Prime Minister's announcement of the Sudarshan Chakra. Yeah. Saying that, India needs not only an economic response, but a strategic military response of a defense citadel, AD topology, offensive poise. Tells me that he's sensing graver dangers ahead. And this may not. So we are in a period of, shall we say, we have to make very stark economic choices. There are security headwinds building us. So this is a time to invest in our autonomous capacities.
It's so interesting. You speak of the Prime Minister sensing graver dangers ahead. When I was listening to his 15th August speech, I felt it was a speech in many ways that was preparing the country for impending conflict. That it is almost as if he could see it coming. I don't know. I didn't want to be alarmist, but a lot of focus on strategic security.
That was my sense too. And the last point that I would like to, so we have to gear up to these challenges. Last point I would like to make it, that IR is not merely about deals. Things like fairness, exceptionalism matter, as Mr. Trump will come to realize in the days to come. And he must also realize that this is no longer an American world. As Fareed Zakaria said, it's a post-American world. Kindly acknowledge and adjust. So these are some of the, thoughts that come to my mind. So it's a period of great churn, exciting times, opportunity. India has to play its cards well.
So let me, before I come back to Ambassador Yash Sinha on whether he agrees with you on these three new spheres, whether he sees it as a post-America world or the Americans as a declining hegemony, let me play out just a clip from Foreign Minister Jaishankar's interaction with his Chinese counterpart, and we'll come right back. Take a look.
The fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is another major priority. I look forward to our exchange of views. Overall, it is our expectation that our discussions would contribute to building a stable, cooperative, and forward-looking relationship between India and China, one that serves both our interests and addresses our concerns.
So, Ambassador Yash Sinha, that is a brief snippet from the talks that are taking place, the Indian and Chinese foreign ministers meeting here in the capital. Do you agree with General Shukla that you are looking at a declining hegemony? I definitely think it's the end of American exceptionalism, but is it also the end of American hegemony? Because those two might not be the same things.
If you frame it like that, I think it is certainly the decline of American exceptionalism. It has been for a while. And when you refer to the US as a declining hegemon, the reason being that you have a rising hegemon, a competitor that is coming up. Now, America, the United States, is still ahead of China and very much the hegemon right now. But in the years to come, and at the speed at which China is catching up, I would say that it is a declining hegemon, and particularly since, ironically, it is the United States itself that has facilitated the rise of China and continues to do so with misguided policies. So I think that is where the problem lies. And I just prove what I'm saying. You have 25% penalty tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. But with China is being handled with kid gloves. And why is that? Because they have something that the US desperately needs, whether it's critical minerals or magnets or whatever. So the fact of the matter is that a 90-day truce or a 90-day sort of leeway has been given to China, and they're increasing their buying of Russian oil at reduced prices. So that is both the irony and the hypocrisy, the whole thing. In fact, I just read a couple of hours ago an astounding statement by Pete Navarro, advisor to President Trump. He says India is oil laundering. Now, that is the first time I'm hearing a term like that, but it's bizarre because the fact is that India is buying that oil, or Indian companies are buying Russian oil at reduced prices, at caps fixed by the West, by the EU and the US, and then it is refining them and selling them to Europe. Why is Europe buying those? Europe
exactly.
is aware these oils are coming. They're not only coming from Russia, by the way, they're coming from other sources too. But it's Europe that's buying huge quantities of refined petroleum products from India. And I dare say, if I recall correctly, even the United States is buying some quantities. So I think there is this great hypocrisy involved. One last point, if I may. I think we still, and I'm sure we are doing it, reaching out to President Trump, or at least people close to him. If we have not been able to do it successfully in the past, we must continue to do so, because you've got the cancellation or the postponement of the trip of the U.S. delegation for the sixth round
trade
of
talks.
talks on trade talks. That is not good. At the same time, President Trump made a statement after Alaska that, I mean, he has not made up his mind what to do with these penalty tariffs. So I do hope with President Putin's call, and I'm not sure whether President Putin and President Trump would have even discussed this aspect. But the fact is that President Putin is very mindful, and he did call the Prime Minister. So I think we need to move in different directions. We need to move nimbly but swiftly.
General Shukla, I want you to talk a little bit about China and what, how India must move nimbly and swiftly also vis-a-vis China. The point is that someone like me, thinks about Operation Sindoor, thinks about what the Deputy Chief of Army said about China's role, and then thinks, okay, what's going on? There are problems with Trump, but the American relationship will presumably outlast Trump. With China, you can't make that forecast. You actually don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to play out. There's an opacity built into even understanding China and China's politics and how China conducts its politics. Should we be, even in the short term, playing this chess game of this India, Russia, China to take on Trump, or should the game be something else?
See, all that I'm saying is that when the faraway hegemon, the dearer friend, has done what it has done to us, we should explore what options we have with China. And what could we do? Without lowering our guard one bit, I'm not making that point at all. I'm a military man. I know all the dangers. Without lowering our guard one bit, there are ways to create what I call fail-proof deterrence along the LAC. So along with this rebalanced posture, if you invest in technologies, there is a way to ensure that there is no deterrence breakdown along the LAC. Insofar as the larger Sino-Indian relationship is concerned, the fact of the matter is that the hiatus is so huge that we need a period of détente, which is what? We buy peace to build our capacities. So that is, common sense. It can be done. So far, we said this privately, let's say it publicly now. Publicly, because the faraway hegemon is not behaving itself. That's what we could do with China. Trust nobody, or let me say trust but verify with everyone. So the surest way to take care of the Chinese and the Americans is by building strategic military capacities. And if Sudarshan Chakra is a metaphor for that, I think that is the wisest way forward. So Sudarshan Chakra, to my mind, is a metaphor for upgrading your AD topologies, building offensive poise. That is what the Prime Minister referred to. And he was also perhaps hinting it is not country or threat focused. It is to create a citadel that will take care of threats from anywhere, because that is the way the world is. It could be China today, it could be America tomorrow, for the only reason that India is rising, and our rise is going to be contested. So if that is the larger Indian strategy philosophy, I think it's very wise. One more point if I may just make.
Yeah.
It's high time we started focusing not only on the diplomacy and all the talk that Ambassador Sinha is suggesting, but also strategic choke points. USA backed off because China had the strategic choke point of rare earths. What are those strategic choke points we need to take care of China if it chooses to get a little naughty, or if the Americans don't behave themselves? मैं तो यही कह रहा हूँ भाई, सबके साथ अमन, बट अगर आप हमारा चैन बिगाड़ोगे तो हमें कुछ तो करना पड़ेगा.
This is an interesting concept about, what is your leverage? Put simply, strategic choke points is what is your leverage to get the bully to keep it, one arm's length from you. In the meantime, before I take final comments from both of you, the Americans have now gone well beyond wanting acknowledgement of their role, stated or overstated, in Operation Sindoor. Marco Rubio is now talking about, quote unquote, keeping an eye on India-Pakistan note the hyphenation every single day. Take a look at at this comment.
We've been asking for a ceasefire for a long period of time. We think usually it's very hard to negotiate when you're in the middle of hostilities. But that said, the only way to have a ceasefire is for both sides to agree to stop firing at one another. Beyond that, and the Russians just haven't agreed to that. Beyond that, I would say that one of the complications about ceasefires is they have to be maintained, which is very difficult. I mean, every single day we keep an eye on what's happening between Pakistan and India, what's happening between Cambodia and Thailand. Ceasefires can fall apart very quickly, especially after a 3.5-year war like what we're facing now. But I don't think anyone disagrees that the ideal here, what we're aiming for, is not some permanent ceasefire. What we're aiming for here is a peace deal. So there's not a war now, and there's not a war in the.
So, I mean, Ambassador Sinha, this has now gone into some, it's almost like he's talking about another age that we're not living in, right? The Americans keeping a daily eye on what the state of play is between India and Pakistan. This suits Pakistan. This is not how India would see it at all. So, I just want your last thoughts as the Americans up their insistence on a role for themselves in India's handling of Pakistan. What might happen at the White House later today that could change the course of our conversation were we to have the same conversation tomorrow?
So I think the context of what Mr. Rubio was referring to was obviously the Russia-Ukraine war. And he mentioned the 3.5-year conflict. But when he talked about the other conflicts, and he mentioned India, Pakistan, keeping a daily eye on what's happening there, or Cambodia, Thailand, I don't think we should read too much into it. Yes, of course, the hyphenation is back, but then we've always lived with that hyphenation in the past. So I think I'm not unduly worried. Yes, if the US tries to insert itself in India-Pak disputes, then that will be an issue that we would need to tackle. We have done that in the past, and I'm sure we'll do it again. But I hope it won't come to that, because I think the US will realize that there are certain issues that they've already rubbed India the wrong way. And if they continue down that path, there will be greater resistance. And what General Shukla mentioned, we all want Aman, but then you must have some leverage. And I think we do have leverage. It's not that we don't. I'm not going to discuss details here on the show, but personally, I feel we do have some leverage, may not be to the extent that China has, but whether we have chosen to exercise it, I am not aware. And sometimes I think it's best to do things quietly, and I'm sure we are doing things quietly. But again, I'd like to reiterate that we need that line to President Trump, and we need to try and cap what is happening, because we don't want it getting worse or the situation escalating. Because I keep repeating this, and pardon me, but I keep repeating this, that this relationship is far too important to sort of be left to the vagaries of one or two or three people.
Yeah. General Shukla, let me give you the last word. Where does this leave the Quad? The Quad seemed to be a formation that came together, at least partially, to take on the hegemony of China. It is partially to checkmate by the Americans the sort of rise of China. Now you have the Russians, the Chinese, and the Indians at this moment. This could change. Sort of in a huddle, a diplomatic version of a football huddle. What happens next?
Barkha, Quad, I do not have very kind words to say about Quad. I'll tell you why. Because it started as some kind of security instrument, maritime security. And then in our attempt to disguise it, we started making vaccines and all that kind of stuff. It lost its original sheen. And while, we said, okay, Quad is broadening into technologies and other issues, it quite lost its original sheen, which was to kind of deter China. And nobody read into that better than the Chinese. So I'm saying that, this coyness of India's coyness of addressing security issues has to end now. As we are ending the big power 10 years back, a prime minister would not have spoken about Sudarshan Chakra. It would have been considered far too offensive. That reality has to now change, in my humble view. Ambassador Sinha, I'm sure, thinks differently. But we need security instruments. I mean, why be coy about it? And if you are coy about them, they lose their original sheen. In the military circles, it had very little respect. And therefore, I was not particularly enthusiastic about Quad. And Mr. Trump has taken out any enthusiasm that may be left in anyone on the Quad.
I think Yash Sinha wants to come in. Ambassador Sinha, go ahead.
Just to tell General Shukla, I completely agree with him. I find the Quad at this stage, especially, and even earlier, because the Quad looked at the Indo-Pacific. But when we were fighting at the land borders, our troops were fighting at the land borders, how much support? Of course, the US did give some support, but there was hardly any sort of rumbling from the other partners that we have in Quad. So I think statements are good, but the fact is that we ourselves, and he's right, in the past, we are the people who've diluted the Quad and what it intended to be because of sensitivities regarding China. But after Galwan, things have changed. And now, obviously, with what is happening, I'm not sure whether Quad will serve any purpose. And having a summit, I think, is not going to happen. We're not going to be hosting it anytime soon, unless there is a complete change, there is a complete change as far as India and US is concerned.
Well, let's see
one last point about Sudarshan Chakra and preparedness. I again completely agree with them. We must focus on our defense and creating the Sudarshan Chakra so that it will take time. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but we need to work assiduously towards strengthening our defenses. And the first step is to incrementally increase our defense budget.
Well, that's a pet cause of General Shukla. I think for years he and I have been talking about it. So let's hope that it finally sort of registers with those who have the power to influence and change policy. In the age of Trump, things are exciting, unpredictable, and also change in the matter of hours. We'll be looking keenly ahead at that meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the White House and see what the world looks like as India wakes up tomorrow morning. Every day, every dawn seems to bring a new twist and turn in the dance of geopolitics. Exciting times, yes, and a time of opportunity for India as well, I think, as both gentlemen have pointed out. General Shukla, Ambassador Sinha, thank you so much. Have a great evening. Always a pleasure. See you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Motor Story and support independent, robust journalism.